4-3 final score over the Soviet Union, and the man who lit the lamp to give Team USA the lead that night at the 10-minute mark exactly of the third period is kind enough to call in with Al Michaels right here in studio, the captain of the 1980 Winter Olympics U.S. men's national hockey team, Mike Eruzione. How are you, Mike?
I'm great. Alfalfa, how you doing, buddy?
I'm fantastic. He calls me Alfalfa. That a name Bob Euchre gave me many, many years ago. And the other one is Hoss. Remember, we always loved the fact that Keith Jackson, the late Keith Jackson, the great Keith Jackson, used to call everybody he's a Hoss. And then he called Hugh Green when Hugh Green was at Pittsburgh and a great defensive end. He said he's a Hoss and a half. So Mike and I we've hossed each other for 38 years now.
It's always great to be on the air with you, friend.
When was the first time, Mike, that you met Al? Do you recall that?
In Lake Placid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up having the pleasure of working with Al and Ken a few Olympic games. After when I was a commentator. So, over the years we've run into each other here and there, golf tournaments, dinners, and like I said, he's a special friend, and we consider him, part of our team. Whenever our team has a reunion, and we haven't had many, but we always try to ask Al to come because he's like an extended member of our family.
Well, I feel like the mascot. I'm like the San Diego Chicken with you guys. I mean, you guys wrote the script. I just happen to have the coda on it at the end of the game. But what you guys did, I mean, 38 years later, people just still love to talk about it. And the thing, Rich, is that Mike goes around the country, and boy, they played that tape, and then Mike gets up there, and the place just goes crazy.
Yeah, it's really been funny, Al. Especially now the last Olympic Games, obviously the phone rings off the hook. Everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to compare. Was this year's team like the 1980 team? And then I got an article the other day, the curling team that won the gold medal. It was called Miracle on Ice.
Right. Miracurl.
Yeah.
Miracurl. That's right. Miracurl. I think the article was.
Yes.
And you try to just nothing. This will never happen again. And it's not about patting ourselves on the back. It's just the whole criteria, the scenario, the Russia's 30-something countries, not one, and the amateur versus the pros, and it'll be an event that you just kind of leave it alone and let it sit by itself.
No, you have to. And then inside the game itself, Mike, when you think about the fact that people always forget that you guys were able to overcome 3 deficits. It was 1-0, it was 2-1, it was 3-2 Soviets. You get the game-winning goal, as it turned out, the tie-breaking goal at the 10-minute mark. But the other thing, as you well know, so much of that game was played in the United States end. People forget the Soviets had 39 shots on goal, and the United States had 16.
Right. And it's funny. I saw the game the other day, Al, for the second time since 1980. I'm in the process of possibly writing a book, and the author, a co-author, wanted me to watch the game with him. And I said, I really haven't seen it, but it'd be fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing to watch the last 10 minutes, though. When we took the lead, I think they only had 3 shots on goal in the last 10 minutes of the game. Mm-hmm. So I was surprised at how well we played once we got the lead. And then the other thing that people don't remember, and I tell them all the time, is we didn't play just one game. We were behind against Sweden, we were behind against the Czechs, we were behind against Norway, we were behind 2 against West Germany,
right.
We were behind against Finland, and still found a way to come back and win. And
right. I
think that's just a testament to we weren't lucky. It wasn't a fluke. We had some pretty good players.
Oh, as it turned, no question about it. And there's such resolve and such resiliency. And when you watch those last 10 minutes, and what I remember about those last 10 minutes, 2 things, Mike. Number one, I mean, all of a sudden, the U.S. team begins to dominate after the Soviets had really dominated for the first, 48, 50 minutes of the game. And then I remember the Soviets were skating insanely short shifts. It was almost like they were out of rhythm. Guys were on the ice for 20 seconds, then they were off. And the other thing that people forget, Mike, is they didn't pull the goalie.
Right.
They didn't pull him. Because and I thought to myself, and this was long after the game had ended, that they probably never practiced it. They never lost, so they were never down within the last minute of the game. But they never pulled the goalie.
Yeah, they never pulled the goalie. And the other thing when I watched the game was they had 3 or 4 icings in the last 10 minutes. That was very uncharacteristic of the Soviets. They never dumped the puck in the zone. They always regrouped and attacked. And again, our speed, our conditioning, our youth, all came to a head right there in our advantage.
Yeah. Mike, I think about so many things. I mean, when the Russians won the gold medal the other night and beat Germany, what the shocking thing to me was in those years, the Soviets won constantly. So they would win the game, big deal. Maybe they'd congratulate each other, and then they'd get into the line to, shake the opponent's hands. Meanwhile, the Russians the other night, they were almost like you guys were in 1980. And I think I told you that in Sochi, I had the chance to interview Tretiak, who was the goalie who was pulled after the first period, and Michigan came in to finish the game. And I said to him, Mike, there's that great shot when you guys are celebrating at the end of that game, and guys are all over the ice, and you're all falling down and on top of each other, and the great toothless grin from Jack O'Callahan. And there's that one cutaway shot. I think it was Golikov of the Soviet team, and he had his chin perched on the stick, and he had that look like, wow, look at that, look at what those guys are doing. And I said to Tretiak and Sochi when I had him in the studio, I said, what were you guys thinking? You guys didn't do that. You saw the American team jumping up and down, falling down on the ice. Oh, he said, they look like the happiest people in the world. We wished we were them. So here we are, 38 years later, and you saw a very different emotion on the part of the Russian team when they won the gold medal the other day.
So true.
Mike Eruzione here on the Rich Eisen Show, along with Al Michaels live. This is great. I just like listening to the two of you guys go back and forth. Mike, I do have to ask you. You said that it's only the second time you've seen this game. Why have you only watched it twice, Mike?
I know the outcome.
Yeah.
Is one, and number two, the last thing I want to be is sitting at home watching the game, and one of my buddies shows up and says, "Mike, let it go." So I have 4 grandsons right now, and I think we'll probably be about 3 or 4 years away from maybe watching it again with them and let them get a sense of what Papa did. And it's funny, Al. You'll get a kick out of this. My grandsons now skate at the Mike Eruzione Center.
Wow.
The rink. But they have no idea who Mike Eruzione is.
Hey, Mike, don't forget you once told me that maybe you haven't watched the whole game, except a couple of times now, but you have watched the highlight of your goal. Because I remember you once told me, you said, if I go home, I'm a little down, I'll put the tape in. And he said, the best thing about it is that every time I shoot, the puck goes in.
I've got more goals than Wayne Gretzky.
So I am mandated to ask you, when was the first time? When was the first time after the game, after those Olympics, Mike, that you saw it?
I had, and this is how old it is, I had a VHS tape.
Sure.
And it probably was maybe 3 years after the games. And unfortunately, the tape that I have only has highlights. It doesn't have the whole game. So I found out, like I said, when I watched with the co-author, that you can go on demand or on YouTube and watch the whole game in its entirety. So that was the first time I've ever seen the whole game. And, I know the game was replayed, not replayed, it was tape delay. So all my teammates had a chance to watch the game after we won, because they all went back to the house with our parents and watched. But I was grabbed, Jimmy Craig and I were grabbed by ABC and did a bunch of interviews and did a thing in the street with Jim Lampley. So, all my teammates got to see it that night. I didn't get to see it then.
So last one for you both, Al Michaels, Mike Eruzione here together, just a few days after the 38th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice. You first, Al, and then you, Mike. How do you think Herb Brooks would take what we think of this team 38 years later, if he was alive today, what it means to everybody? What do you think he would say about that?
Well, the interesting thing about Herb was a hockey coach, and the rest of the world existed, but he was so driven and so focused, and he brought that team to the point where they did what they did. But here it was, I'll never forget, a week and a half later, Herb Brooks could have been king of America at that point. I mean, he had to be the most popular person in the United States. What did he do? Instead of going around the country and, taking all the accolades and all the rest, he went to Switzerland and he coached a club team, I think in Davos. Wow. Yeah. He was a hockey coach. And the other thing, briefly, is that when Sports Illustrated in 1999 took over Madison Square Garden and did a show, They put 13,000 people in the arena. And the U.S. victory in the 80 Olympics was ranked as the number one moment. And they had me introduce the team. The place went crazy. And Herb and I are walking down the stairs, and he looked at me and he said, how could they vote that number one? And I said, Herb, how could they not vote it number one? Don't you understand what happened?
Right.
So Herb, he was a hockey coach, and everything else was ancillary.
Mike?
Yeah, Al, I would agree in that 100%. I remember he never, when we had some functions, he never even came to the functions. He just stayed away. He let us enjoy the moment. He was the coach, but we were the players, and he let us enjoy every moment. And it's funny, the last time we were on the ice at Madison Square Garden was when we lost 10-3 to the Soviets, and now we're in tuxedos being claimed the greatest moment in the 20th century. So
Right.
Herb was very proud of our team, and I think he would have been even prouder now knowing how special that moment has become in the hockey world. How many more kids probably started playing hockey because of what we did in 1980. And I've said many times, we might have opened the door, but today's players have knocked the door down. So I think Herb would have been very, very proud of where USA Hockey is at. And it started, I think, really in 1980.
And in fact, just to button up what you said, when I interviewed Trediak and we did that interview about you guys looking like the happiest guys in the world, he said American hockey owes that team what they're doing right now. They opened up the door. They created what hockey is in this country right now, a lot bigger than it was in 1980, and it's all thanks to that team in 1980.
And thanks to you, Mike. I really appreciate you taking the time to join Al here in studio and your first foray here on the show. I hope it's not your last. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And Al, say hi to Linda, and I'm on the 15th hole right now, so I'll talk to you in a little while.
And hi to Donna, who he always called Donna. He's married to Donna, but it's always like D-A-W-N-A. Hi to Donna.
And Mike, again, I just want to speak just real quick. Speak on behalf of the 11-year-old who watched that. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Thanks.
You bet.
Take care, guys.
You bet.
Bye, Mike.
I get emotional, Al.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.